Okay, so welcome everybody. Tonight I am going to talk about the difference between wants and needs. And this was inspired by a conversation I had today with Tom. So thank you, Tom, for sparking this in my mind. So this was a question that my husband actually asked a Zen master of mine before he and I were married. We were dating, and he went to a public talk with me, wanted to find out what this Zen thing was about that his girlfriend was into. And I don't remember what Zen Master Jibong said, to be perfectly honest. But I have thought about it a lot in the years since then. What is the difference between a need and a want? And it really depends on how we define those terms. So I can tell you how I define them, but you may define them differently. I look at needs as something that's going to keep me alive. Wants are everything else. Now, when I was going through cancer, there was a period of time when it was a little dicey and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. And I was okay with that. Not at first. At first there was that moment of stark raving terror, which lasted for 5 to 7 minutes, I would say. And then I realized that, it's okay. Whatever happens, it's going to be okay. And I was that way pretty much for the rest of my cancer journey. If you ever watch The Simpsons, there's this character in the nuclear power plant, and every time that they're about to have a meltdown and everybody's going to die and it's going to wipe out Springfield, this guy goes, it's been a good run. And this became the joke with my husband and me during this period, and it's still our joke. It's like, it's been a good run. And I was okay with it. So during that point, I didn't have any needs. I had absolutely no needs because I was okay with whatever happened. But for purposes of our conversation, let's say needs are things that keep us alive and wants are everything else. I was watching a science fiction short. Ooh, you can hear my dog moving around. I was watching a sci-fi short last night, and these aliens are deciding whether or not to wipe out the Earth. And it's never really explained why, but they're evaluating humanity to see if we're worth saving. So they get this guy who's just this random person, Joe Average, and they're asking him a series of questions. And one of the questions is for him to prioritize a list of items. And the items are food, water, oxygen, heroin, the sound a horse's hooves make on pavement, world peace. And I think that's it. I think that was all of them. So he's like, I forgot the most important one for that story, and that is free video streaming for life. And so our Joe Average human says, well, what can I stream? Is it unlimited? Is there everything included? And he asked a whole bunch of questions about the streaming. It was really cute. And the Earth is saved, humanity is saved, because it turns out the aliens had him hooked up to a lie detector, and all they were looking for is that he told the truth. And he did. Streaming was the most important thing to him. But that is definitely a want and not a need, using our criteria of needs keep us alive. So if I look at the list and I prioritize it, I would say oxygen is first, because a lack of oxygen will kill me faster than anything else. And then water, because a lack of water will kill me next fastest. And then food, because a lack of food will kill me third fastest. And then there are no other needs on the list. Now you could make a case for world peace, because there are some people who are going to die if we don't have world peace. I'm probably not one of them. I'm very privileged. I'm white, I live in the United States. I'm probably not going to die in a war. There's a lot of other ways I could die. It's probably not going to be in war. And so I could say, well, that's not an imminent danger to me. So that's a want and not a need. But you could make a case that it's a need because other people are going to die. So it's kind of, So it's not necessarily black and white. After that, my next want would be the sound of a horse's hooves on pavement, because I love horses. And then, yeah, I'll take the streaming service. And the heroin, I can pass. That's not even a want. How am I going to be mindful if I'm high? Rather difficult. So we can skip that one altogether. But that gives you an idea of needs versus wants. Now, if someone is addicted to heroin, they're going to tell you it's a need. And they're going to think they're going to die if they don't get it. And they're going to have some pretty nasty withdrawal symptoms if they don't get it. But if they're in a hospital situation and they have proper care, they're not going to die. It's going to be nasty, but they're not going to die. There were times when I thought I really needed relief from the effects of chemo. But, you know, I mean, I got through it, right? So clearly it wasn't a need because there was no relief and I'm still here. What does this have to do with Buddhism? I'm glad you asked that question. The Buddha told us in the Second Noble Truth that the cause of suffering is attachment, unhealthy attachment, because we use the word attachment in English a lot for different things, but in Buddhism, it has that connotative meaning of being unhealthy. It's too much, it's grasping, clinging, desire. It's the feeling like we're gonna die if we don't get it. Life is over if we don't get it. It's that degree of attachment. It is mistaking a want for a need. We have needs and it's okay to honor those needs. We need oxygen. If a fire breaks out, get away from the smoke. If you are starting to dehydrate, drink some water. If you're unhealthy because you're not getting enough water, fewer sodas, more water. If you are hungry, eat something, preferably something healthy. These are not attachments in the Buddhist sense. These are biological imperatives in order for us to survive. They're needs, it's fine. But when we start thinking specifically what we need, well, I don't like plain water. I can only drink something if it's flavored. That's a want, that's not a need. Well, I have to have this particular diet. Let me tell you something. I'm vegetarian. And about, gosh, 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago, somewhere in there, I went through this crisis where I thought I have to be vegetarian. I mistook it for a need, and it's really only a want. And I got served something that had meat into it in a restaurant by mistake, and I had bitten into it because, you know, it was little things in a bigger dish, and I didn't see it, and I ate it, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not a vegetarian anymore. It's, you know, I was doing the whole sorry for myself, and you know, and it was never about me. It's about doing no harm. That's the whole reason I became a vegetarian in the first place. So I had a talk with my teacher at the time, Zen Master Jibong, who very lovingly and kindly with great compassion told me to get over myself. And it was wonderful. It was exactly what I needed. I don't needed, right? I don't need to be a vegetarian. I want to be a vegetarian. I choose to be a vegetarian, but I'm not going to die if I accidentally ingest some animal protein. It's okay. It's all about intent. And even if I were to choose to no longer be vegetarian, that's okay too. It's not a requirement for me to live. It's not a requirement for me to be a Buddhist. So it's fine. So that's just another example of how we can make that mistake of thinking that something that we want is something that we need. People go to a restaurant and they want a specific dish, and they mistakenly think they need that specific dish. And then if the restaurant's out, they're all upset, their evening's ruined, they want to go somewhere else, they can't stand it, I'm never coming back here. It's not a need, people, it's just a want. You had your taste buds primed for that thing. Well, prime it for something else. There's other things on the menu, it's fine. So we make a big deal out of these things. Lama Tsultrim has a book called Feeding Your Demons. And in that book, you engage with the internal demons, our shadow selves, if I can use Jungian psychology. And we don't try to slay our demons. We try to feed them what they need, not what they want. And this is an important distinction, again, in this process. In the dialogue with our demons, which are internal, we ask the demon, what do you want? What do you need? And how are you going to feel when you get what you need? So these first two are very different. The demon might say something like, I want more money in my bank account. And again, we're talking to our own subconscious mind here. And then we ask the demon, well, what do you really need? I need to be secure with my finances. I need to be financially independent, says the demon. Well, how are you going to feel when you get what you really need? And the demon might say something like, I'm going to feel safe. Maybe there's some fundamental safety issue. It's got nothing to do with money. So that kind of deep work can help us reveal the difference between some of our wants and some of our needs. And it can come up in all kinds of funny ways. Lama Tsultrim uses the example of the demon wanting ice cream, when what it really needs is security and safety. A lot of safety issues come up in this work. So I don't want to get too far afield onto feeding your demons. Lama Tsultrim has a book by that title if you want to know more. And eventually I will lead you all through it again. It's been over a year since we've done that as a Sangha. So I'll take you through the meditation when I get back from Montenegro, and we'll explore it then. But the idea is that even on a subconscious level, we get needs and wants confused. We think that we need something that we merely want. So I'd like to open it up now if anybody wants to share an example that you can think of, preferably from your own life, of where you have mistaken a want for a need.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Would social connections count as a need or as a want?
That's a good question. Social connections keep us psychologically healthy for most people. I know a woman who spent 20 years living on retreat in a cave. So for her, social connections were not a need. But for some people, they may be a need for our psychological health. Are we going to die? No, but let's include staying sane on the list of needs. So my answer to that is it depends on the person. If it's something that keeps you healthy and on an even keel, then consider that a need, and that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Monica.
Yes. How about temperature? We can't survive if we get too hot or too cold. Isn't that
very good?
You to either have clothing or something to keep us at an acceptable temperature.
No, that's a really good example. There's a really narrow range at which we're comfortable, and then there's a somewhat wider range at which we can survive. Does that make sense? And then beyond that, we die.
Yeah, so we need to be, have access to that, either with extra clothing or cooling or something.
Exactly, exactly. So there's the range at which we're comfortable. For me personally, that's about 71 to 74. It's really narrow. And there's the range at which I can survive. If I have warm clothing, I can survive down to below freezing. And if I have air conditioning, it doesn't matter what it is outside, but if I'm outside in the summer, I can survive. I don't know, how high is the temperature that people can survive at? 110, 112, something like that. And we'll live. We need a lot of fluid, but we'll live. But then it gets a little further than that in either direction, and we die. So my 71 to 74, that's my want, right? My need is much wider. And then beyond that, yeah, I'm in trouble. That's a great example. Thank you, Monica. when I was dating Michael, one of my friends asked me, and she meant this with great compassion. She was actually giving me a lesson here because I was very clingy when we were dating. And she said, "Does Michael need you?" And I said, "No." And I was all upset that he was so independent and didn't need me. And she says, "Well, lucky you. He's with you by choice." I wanted to smack her, but she was right. She was absolutely right. Needs and wants. You know, he didn't need me. He wanted to be with me. And it's the same way with me with him now. He had a motorcycle accident a couple years ago, and it was not a big deal. But when I got a phone call from a stranger who was at the site telling me my husband had been in a motorcycle accident, there were a few seconds of holy crap. Is he dead? Is he gonna die? What's going on? And I realized in those few seconds, and by few, I mean like 3 to 5 seconds, that I was going to be fundamentally okay, even if he was dead. I was going to miss him like crazy for several years, but I was going to be fundamentally okay. And then the very nice man, I still remember his name was Andre, said, "He's okay, he's up and talking." And I said, ah. So yeah, needs versus wants. Does anybody else have an example? And it's okay if you don't. Mojo just fussed at me. I think he has an example, but I don't speak Shih Tzu well enough to know what it is. He wants dog food. He wants a specific type of dog food. He just needs food, but he wants a specific type. And if I don't feed him that, he goes on a hunger strike.
I remember that I was reading on a book and they called it non-negotiables. And this woman had a anxiety, and she found out that for herself specifically, she needed time for herself during the day, at least 10 to 30 minutes. And so for reflection and digesting like what happened to her during the day, you know, the events that occurred. And also another non-negotiable was meditation for her. And that kind of went in with her, with what you're saying with sanity, like keeping a sane mind. And I think for me also meditation, if I don't do it, say for a week and a half, I start noticing I rarely go that long, but if I ever go past 3 or 5 days, for whatever reason, I start noticing I get a little bit, I changed, I don't know, and I don't like it. And Rosa doesn't like it either. So, so I think while I know that I will not die if I don't meditate, I also know that I, maybe there's other practices, you know, that I have to venture on, you know, like when I run for a while, I notice I get tired and I can easily go to sleep more easily, you know, and I'm just become more quiet during the day, but that's not a need. So I guess I confuse maybe meditation for a need because I think, oh, it helps with my anxiety, but at the same time, you know, and I don't want to be taking pills or anything. And but at the same time, I won't die if I don't meditate.
But
So
Rosa might kill
it's an
you.
iffy one.
But Rosa might kill you if you don't meditate.
I know.
Monica?
Isn't sleep a necessity for human beings? A certain
Yes,
amount
it
of
is.
sleep.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
good.
sleep is another one that we put in the biological column. Yeah, gotta sleep. Yeah. Yeah, so Marianne.
I was going to say, you know, one that nobody wants to really talk about, but is tied in with so many others is, although you probably could survive without money, you'd either have to survive with money or with a lot of kindness. You know, so much of our existence is tied into, you know, without money, we can't pay our rent or keep a roof over our head. We can't buy food. We can't, you know, buy clothing to shelter ourselves from the elements, or, you know, so many things. And so, you know, and probably about the only alternative to, you know, getting by without money is you'd have to get by on somebody else's kindness or or you'd have to be very, very industrious as a kind of survivalist type person. So,
Or
Yeah.
inherit great wealth and you won't have to worry about anything.
but you're still using money, right? You're still
Mhm.
spending the wealth that you inherited.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And Marion, I think that's a really great example. So yes, a certain amount of money is needed. The question then becomes, where is the dividing line between how much money I need and how much money I want? Yeah. So yeah, in our culture, you need a certain amount, but what is that? What is that sustenance level? Yeah, it's a great example.
And it's very relative too, because I might think I need a car, you know, like to drive to work. It takes me 20 minutes. So without a car, it would be really hard to, I don't know, maybe an hour at least to walk there. And then with a bike, you know, so I need a car, but I know many people who don't have cars, and just things that I think I need in the US. You know, I've looked at pictures, and I mean, I've seen it. You know, what am I talking about? I've seen it in Mexico when I go there. People really live with very little, you know, like $3 to $4 a week, you know, and they scrape by with those, just like, you know, sometimes $1 for 2 or 3 days, they make it count, you know. So it's like, obviously I would not like to live with $10 a week, you know, but our needs also can be sometimes relative. Like, you know, I feel like I need a lot and compared to other people, you know.
And that's a very good point. And it depends on the cost of living where you are and how far you live from where you work. I mean, rent is higher here than in other parts of the country, and a lot higher than in other countries. Some other countries, some places it's higher than here. And then how far do you live from where you work? Can you take a bicycle? Can you walk? I used to live literally, there was a cornfield between my apartment complex and my office. And yes, this was in Texas. And depending on the time of the year and how high the corn was, I could cut through the field or I could just walk around it. One place that I worked on a college campus, one of the other professors biked to work every day. She took her bicycle, excuse me. So that was great. So it just depends. Yeah.
Electric bikes are a nice in between.
I agree.
There's some that are basically like motorcycles.
Yep. And there are fully electric motorcycles now. Yeah, which is really nice.
my husband just built himself an electric bike, and yeah, he's getting around everywhere on it. He went to, the next town on it, just yesterday. Went to Moreno Valley on his
Awesome.
electric bike, and yeah, he loves it.
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know, and for anybody who may watch the video later, Marion's husband hasn't driven in I don't know how many years. And does he need a car? No, he makes it work. So yeah, he does fine. So that's another example. And it depends also on what we have to do. If you have to do something, you have to go to work and you don't have a car, you will find a way to get to that job. So yeah, these have been some great examples. So it's hard to draw a bright line and say, okay, everything from here over is, let me find my visual aid. This is why teachers have a stick, because it's very handy. So it's a continuum between wants and needs. And I can set a line here, but really it's kind of a little bit loose, isn't it? I initially said, well, okay, everything that keeps us alive biologically, that's a need. Everything that doesn't, that's a want. But now we've said, well, what about things that keep other people alive? Let's move the line over, like world peace. What about things that improve our psychological health, like meditation? Let's move the line over. So you can see that it's not as clear cut as I initially made it out to be. There's a lot of things that we have to consider. So the next time you get your knickers in a twist and you're unhappy because things have not gone your way, think about, is this really a want or a need? What is this? I advise you to look and say, well, am I attached to this? But sometimes it's hard to know, well, what is attachment? And we use that word for so many different things in English. How do I know? Well, is it something that I actually need, or is it just something that I want? Most of the time, it's going to be a want. And if we can recognize that, then we can reduce our suffering by saying, well, it's just something I want. If I don't get it, it's fine. It's not the end of the world.
That's why I think it's healthy to go camping at least, maybe, I don't know how often you need to do it, but maybe once a year. Because when you're out there and kind of away from society for a little bit, you realize, oh, kind of these basics about what you're talking about, the needs. But living in an urban, sophisticated, fast-paced life, and there's so much social pressure that we experience, right? Like, I have to wear these type of clothes or this or that, the other, which kind of feeds, there's just so much subtle and not so subtle consumerism with all the ads, and you know what I mean? And just going to the store, you're like I went to Burlington Coat Factory or one of these, and it's like, oh man, I want that, but I'm trying to no, I just need this and that. I just need maybe one thing, but it's so easy to be like, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. But camping's good because it's like you get away and you're like, oh, water, awesome. Food, awesome. Shelter, awesome. I'm not cold, awesome. I'm not too hot, awesome. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is really actually simple, but when you're living in the city in our lifestyle, it's like there's all these pressures that we experience. That's why a lot of the Thai monks, or originally the Buddha was going to the forest, right? Going to the forest and meditate. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah, all of our consumerism is just needs. I was actually in a store the other day, shopping for shoes. Oh, I'm sorry, wants. Thank you. I was in a store the other day looking at shoes, and I saw a coat, and I thought, "Ooh, I really like this coat." And I thought, I do not need another coat. I'm good for several more winters. So off to the shoe department because I needed shoes in the sense that my old ones were wearing out, and so in that sense. It wouldn't kill me to go barefoot, although there are places that won't let you go barefoot. And with the summer, I don't really want to walk on the asphalt with bare feet because that can blister me. So for health reasons, yeah, and sanitation, I wanted some new shoes. But I certainly did not need another coat.
That reminds me that I listened to a guy that sings in Spanish. He's from Argentina. He played, I think, through the 80s, 90s, and a little bit of 2000s. And he tells a story. He's like a troubadour, He tells a story that there was a philosopher that went in the market, and he loved seeing all these things that he didn't need. And he just went. And then sometimes when I go to the mall, I try to, not always with success, but I try to have that kind of intention. Like, look at all these many things that I don't need. So, and it's kind of like being grateful, I guess, in a way. And also it reminds me of San Francis, where he says, I desire little, and the little that I desire it little. So I like that too.
Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful, that quote by St. Francis.
I got to wondering,
Marion and then Tom.
I got to wondering, how about the needs of the planet as a whole? Some of that is probably fairly high priority. Things, I don't know, that collectively, do we need to stop, using so much plastic? Do we need to, curb our behavior on some fronts? So anyway, just something to consider.
No, that's another great example, because if we don't make some changes, there are going to be some consequences. So there's a very, very strong argument there that that's a need. Yeah. Tom?
I just wanted to kind of make full circle to where you started earlier when you talked about your experience with cancer. And there was a moment, maybe 5, 10, 15-minute moment of panic. And then there was a moment of release where you were not clinging to life anymore. And the Buddha tells us that's the only place that suffering stops, is when you quit clinging to the cycle of samsara. And when you can give up clinging to life, as you realized you had to do in order to survive, actually, that's when you stop suffering. And I see that in your story, that's when you, you still had a lot of pain and turmoil that happened to your body as you were recovering and your chemotherapy, but the mental suffering stopped when you stopped clinging to life as though that was a need, because in actuality it was not a need. Again, I was just trying to bring this back to the Four Noble Truths, that the only way to reach liberation, or i.e. the end of suffering, and we all, even the Bodhisattva idea is that we help other people attain that end of suffering. It's to cease clinging at all, including clinging to life. So anyway, this taking that full circle, and I appreciate your story, because as you told your story, I said that's the letting go, and unfortunately, as I'm sure you've experienced and we've all experienced in some way, we can let go other times and then grasp again, and that's just life. But the Buddha managed to learn to let go and stay let go. So yeah, I see that moment of enlightenment that you experienced when you decided, okay, I just accept whatever happens, it's okay. And that's the cessation of suffering. So that was my only comment.
Yeah, thank you. And that is the cessation of suffering. I still had some pain, but as we've talked about at other times, pain and suffering are different. Pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. And by the way that I liberated myself from the suffering in that moment in my hospital bed, because I was supposed to have had stage 1 cancer and they were supposed to take it out and that was going to be the end of it. And then I woke up to find my husband crying, and he told me that it was in my lymph system. And luckily I was still pretty heavily sedated. So I had a gradual waking up period to kind of get used to the idea of, holy crap, I could die from this. And when that thought took full hold, I fed the demon of my fear. And it never came back. A lot of demons take multiple feedings. That one didn't. It's like, okay, if I die, I die. It's going to be okay. I believe in life beyond this. And if I'm wrong, I'll never know. So, so it's all good. Any last thoughts before we do our closing chants?
My last thought is there's too many near-death experience stories, though, that would tell you that you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I agree, Caesar. And I believe in it for a lot of different reasons that we don't have time to get into tonight, including remembering a couple of my past lives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, but yeah. So
Were you
so
Cleopatra?
No, I wasn't. I was nobody important.
You weren't Joan of Arc?
No, wasn't her either. And it's all good.
That would be a good topic for another day, the mysterious things on. Hopefully we can see each other soon in person.
I would like that very much. We'll see if we can arrange something once I get back. In fact, the first week I'm back, let's talk about that as a Sangha. I'm open to suggestions on where we meet and how often we want to do it in person and all that kind of stuff. We'll get something set up.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Take
Bye.
care.
Great
Take
trip.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.